write to people. Write like you're writing to your gran, to your mum, to your uncle, to your mate down the pub. Don't think about writing to a SaaS company. Think about writing to Jim, who works at a SaaS company. I'm Will Slater, and this is SEO in 2026.
Well, what's your number one SEO tip for 2026?
So my number one tip is be more mixtape, specifically when you're writing content. To explain that, I need to take you back in time a little bit to the mid-90s. Now, I'm a big music fan, have been for most of my life. And my formative years with music were in the 90s. And back in the 90s, the main way, and before I guess as well, the main way of sharing music, there was two kind of main ways. There was listening to the radio, and there was making mixtapes and sharing mixtapes with your friends. Now, creating mixtapes was hard work. It was a faff because you had to figure out exactly what tracks were going to be in what order. You had to sit in front of your stereo, picking out your records or your CDs and pressing play and record on your tape deck. But the thing is, that meant every mixtape that anybody made was special because people put this much thought and effort into it. And we skip forward now to today, and we've got the big streaming services. We've got Spotify and Apple Music and Tidal. And don't get me wrong, these things are absolutely brilliant. I love them. I love the fact that I can think I want to listen to X song at X time, and it's just there like that. It's fantastic. But one of the things I'm not so keen on with the big streaming services, and this will get to SEO, I promise, is their generated playlists, the algorithmically generated playlists, which monitor what you listen to, and they monitor what other people who listen to similar stuff listen to, and they build you a playlist based on that. Now, theoretically, that sounds like a great idea because you can stick a playlist on and you know you can get something you like. And sometimes it is, sometimes it's great. But the danger is, if you only ever listen to those playlists, you never really hear anything new. You get sucked into this sort of cycle of sameness and mediocrity because you're going down the middle of the road. Everything's sort of filtered into this one thing that Spotify knows that you like. Now, you're probably wondering what all this has got to do with SEO. The thing is, the content that we consume on the internet specifically, but in general, has kind of gone the same way. The speed and volume at which stuff is produced is absolutely insane. And with the advent of AI in the last couple of years, that's just massively expanded this even further. Because the danger is with the AI tools, everybody uses the same tools. Everybody uses pretty similar prompts. So everything, all the writing that's produced becomes more and more bland and generic. That's a danger anyway. It's like everything becomes that middle ground. I'll caveat this by saying I do use AI tools. I'm not anti-AI. I use them in the writing process, but not for actually writing content. And there's a few reasons for this. I think there's a few reasons that it's a problem. But the biggest one is that AI is not a human being. It's got no experience of the world. It's got no experience of your products. It's got no experience of your competitors. It's never stood at the front of a gig with its fist in the air screaming the lyrics with 100 other people, or it's never danced in a field in the middle of Milton Keynes because it's lost all its mates, or listened to the same song on repeat, sat on the floor crying because it reminds it of the person it's just broken up with. It's not got any of these experiences. So anything it spits out is just an amalgamation of things that other people have written about vaguely similar things. And there's times when maybe that's fine, but it's never going to stand out. It's never going to be unique. And that's what you want for your brand. That's how you get people, to click through to your website, to read your stuff, to actually do what it is that you want them to do. And for the same reason, AI content is quite often just wrong. But we all laugh about the time when Gemini told people to put glue on pizza. But that's kind of indicative of a deeper problem because AI's never eaten pizza. It's never stuck anything with glue. It's never smelt glue and thought, that's horrific. You never want to put that in your mouth. So it can't possibly know what's right and wrong. It has no concept of reality because it's got no experience. And that's literally one of the big four things that Google talks about in its EAT. It's experience, expertise, authoritativeness, and trustworthiness. And AI can't really do any of those because it's not lived in the real world. And another problem with AI is it's really bad at waffling. I've noticed with AI content, it will often churn out paragraph after paragraph that you kind of scan over it and nominally, grammatically, it makes sense. But when you actually try and break it down and see what point this thing is trying to make in this paragraph, you can't, because it's not actually saying anything. There is no point. And again, that is the opposite of what Google wants. It's the opposite of concise, helpful content, which is what readers want as well, because that's basically what Google want you to write, is things that's good for the users. And ironically, it's actually quite bad for what Google wants for its own AI mode, because that wants simple, concise, clear answers that it can pull and amalgamate into its own AI answers. So the question is, how do you make your content more mixtape and less playlist? My number one tip, but the biggest thing you can do when you're writing, is write for another human being, which sounds really obvious, but a lot of the time we don't. We write for a SaaS company, or we might go with a persona. We might say, a 45-year-old man who lives in Slough and likes cats. I don't know. But the problem with that is it's not a human being. It's just writing for this idea. So what I like to do is do if I was making a mixtape, I would generally be making it for a specific person. That person might be me. It might be a girl that I'm trying to impress. It might be somebody in a band that I'm going on a road trip with, all sorts of things. So when I'm writing a piece of content, I haven't met the person that I'm going to write it for. I invent them in my head. So I spend a little bit of time just thinking of a person. I give them a name. I imagine what they're like, and I write as if I'm having a conversation with a real person. And it's a great way to cut out all the jargony blah and the waffle that if you imagine you're having a conversation with someone in the pub, the stuff that you just wouldn't say in real life. And that helps to make something that people identify with. It's like it makes them energized and excited because it's real. It's like somebody's actually talking to them. Yeah, it takes away that genericness of writing for a generic persona. Because one of the things we forget when we're writing is that even whether it's business to business or whatever, the person who's reading it at the other end is a human being. It's not a company that's reading it. It's an actual human sat at a desk or on their phone on the toilet or whatever it is. So to get some personality in there, it makes it a lot real and it's more easy to identify with. The next thing, there's a few other tips as well that can really help with making that mixtape style content. The next one is to make sure it flows well. So you make sure your content flows from song to song. You maybe start with like a real banger of a tune that really grabs people and hooks them in. And you maybe start with that hook, you start with a song that somebody likes. Or maybe it's a band covering a song they like, or something that you know is going to grab them. And you do the same with your content. You write about them. You talk about the problem that they've got. You don't start talking about you. And then as you go through, you bring in more of your stuff and you start talking about that a little bit more around the context of the person that you're writing for. And another thing to remember with mixtapes, and probably a lot of the people listening to this won't have ever used a cassette tape, but you had to rewind them to the start if you wanted to start from the beginning. And a lot of time, people wouldn't. I used to listen to tapes loads in the car, and I had a tape which whenever we went, so I lived in a little village and we drive to see bands in big city. Every time we got back to the village, it would be playing the same song on the tape. But people don't rewind tapes, so quite often you'll be starting from the middle. People aren't necessarily going to read your content in a linear way. They might read the headline, they might read the intro, and then they might skip through to see the bits that they think are most relevant to them. So you need to make sure that the whole thing makes sense, even if people are reading sections and paragraphs in isolation, because there's a good chance that the people are going to skip through. You don't want any of those songs that people, you say, oh, it works really well in the context of the album, because that's not how people are consuming it. And then it's really important that you need to end with an absolute banger. And this is another place where people often trip up a little bit. People will finish their content with just by saying, get in touch if you want to find out more, which is the most generic, boring thing. It makes it forgettable. So when you're finishing, do something epic. It's that song that finishes the playlist. That's the mixtape that's 10 minutes long and it's got the epic guitar solo. Make people feel something at the end of your content. So when they're finished, when they're reading it, it really sticks in their mind. It could make them laugh, make them cry. It doesn't matter exactly what it is. Make them want to do the thing that it is that you're selling. But yeah, finish on that absolute epic ender. And I guess my epic ending here is to say that AI isn't that great at writing. It has its uses, absolutely. It's very good at some things. But you're not rubbish at writing. You're really good. You're full of empathy and experience and knowledge that AI just can't compete with. And it doesn't matter if you're not perfect. It doesn't matter if it's not the toppest, notchest, super quality writing, because imperfect is actually quite good, because that's what stands out now, because it's real. It stands out in the kind of increasingly similar AI content that we're seeing everywhere on the internet.
It's intriguing that you used mixtape as your analogy, because what you could have also done is said, well, a human chosen series of songs on Spotify, a human chosen playlist, as opposed to an algorithm generated one. And to a certain degree, what you're doing here is you're saying, something a little bit more tangible, like a mixtape, something you can feel physically, is what you're comparing the algorithm against. So what, using the same analogy, what do you think is the difference between a mixtape and a human chosen song list on Spotify?
I think there's a couple of key things. I think the first thing is, as you say, the physicality of it. When you make a mixtape, you're not just sat in front of your computer clicking. You've got to go to your CD collection and flick through, or your record collection, and find the tracks you want, find the records you want. I think that kind of transposes to the research of the content as well, because it's kind of like your research phase. It's not all just there straight for you. You're not just going for the easiest solution. You're digging that little bit deeper. You're really making the effort. Because again, Spotify makes it too easy. Not too easy, but it makes it very easy to find songs. If you think, I want to put a song on by Hot Water Music, one of my favourite bands, type in Hot Water Music and it'll give you a list of the top 5 songs by that artist. When you're making a mixtape, when you're going back in time, you've got 6 CDs to choose from with 60 songs to pick from. And you don't know which one's the most famous. You don't know which one's the most popular. You're choosing the one that's most important to you, that really grabs you. And it might not be the same one that everybody else is listening to.
What metrics do you look at in your content to show that human written content, content with significant human input into it, performs better than AI content?
We always try to look way beyond the kind of top level metrics. Ranking is a great start, but if nobody's clicking through, rankings don't mean anything. Click through is another important step on the journey, but if people aren't reading the content and people aren't converting, then it's still worthless or close to worthless, depending on the content itself. So we tend to track content depending on the style of content. Obviously, it's different if it's an informational piece to whether it's a product page or a landing page. But we track the conversions. If people are actually doing what we want them to do, if the page is making money for the client, then that's a successful page. If it's not doing that, then we need to look a bit deeper and say, actually, it's an informational piece. It's not converting directly, but it's bringing a lot of traffic in, and that traffic is moving further into the website, or that traffic is coming back, then that has value as well.
Will, what's the key takeaway from the tip you shared today?
My key takeaway is write to people. Write like you're writing to your gran, to your mum, to your uncle, to your mate down the pub. Don't think about writing to a SaaS company. Think about writing to Jim, who works at a SaaS company.
Will Slater is a creative content specialist at 43 Clicks North. Find out more over at 43clicksnorth.co.uk. Will, thanks so much for being part of SEO in 2026.
Thank you very much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
I've been your host, David Bain. Get your copy of SEO in 2026, the book, over at SEOin2026.com.